Let's begin this video with a few questions. Who is the most significant Portuguese footballer of all time? Cristiano Ronaldo? But a case could also be made for Eusebio or even Figo. Who is the most incredible Frenchman? That one might be a toss-up between a few players. Zidane, Henry, and Platini all fit the bill, having all been outstanding players. Greatest Argentinian? Messi and Maradona pop into mind, and if you want to know why we think Maradona outshines the little magician, click the link in the video description to see our video on that. And our final question is, who is the most incredible Italian of all time? Roberto Baggio, the divine ponytail. End of discussion. Sure, you can make a decent case for Buffon or Pirlo, maybe even Maldini, but they have yet to see the challenges, tribulations, highs and lows quite like Baggio. He is, after all, a Ballon d'Or winner. Let's start at the beginning, and when I said Baggio went through a lot in his life, you better be sure he didn't start easy. He was born into a low-income family and was the sixth of 8 brothers and sisters. Seeing that his family was not well off, it is no surprise that Baggio took to playing the sport billions of kids worldwide play on the street: football. But unlike most kids, this small Italian boy seemed to have the touch of a feather and played with the ball glued to his feet. What he did better than anyone, though, was score goals. He was so prolific that when he was just 11 years old, he had scored 65 goals in 25 matches. That's almost a hat-trick per game. He got his senior debut for Vicenza, who swooped him from his native Caldogno for $300 at just 15, an age that's still to this day insane, seeing as most footballers don't make their senior debuts until age 18 or 19, and even when they do, they're not integral to their teams. But a career in the second tier of Italian football doesn't make a GOAT, and before long, it came time for the young Roberto to make his move to a suitably big club. That club was to be Fiorentina. But all did not go according to plan for Baggio at La Viola, as he got injured just before joining the Florence side and had to undergo a terrible knee surgery without the help of any painkillers, seeing as he was allergic to them. And even though the doctors said the injury was career-ending and he would never play football again, Baggio decided otherwise. He decided at 18 years of age he would play football. Not only would this legend play football, but he would also become one of the greatest players the world had ever seen. And Fiorentina believed in him. They paid Vicenza, his former club, £1.5 million for his transfer, an amount unheard of since the transfer fee paid for Maradona at the time was £5 million. It would be the equivalent of Atletico Madrid paying $112 million for João Felix today. Absolutely bonkers. Although, to be fair, it did turn out better for Fiorentina than it did for Atletico Madrid. He missed his entire debut season for Fiorentina in 1985-86, only playing in a single cup game. The following season wasn't much better, as he missed most of the season due to another knee injury, though not in its entirety. He would score his first goal in the last game of the season for La Viola, scoring the equalizer against none other than Maradona's Napoli, that year's champions. His goal helped Fiorentina stay in Serie A for the 88-89 season, Baggio's breakthrough season, with 15 league goals, 24 goals in all competitions, and 7th in the championship, meant Baggio helped La Viola achieve 7th in the league and qualifications to the UEFA Cup, today the Europa League. And in the 89-90 season, they reached the competition's final and lost to none other than Juventus. At this point, he was by many considered the best player playing in Italy at the time. Did we mention Maradona also played in Italy at the same time and was in his most dominant form? Yeah, that's how good this man was. He was so good, he was compared to God. In 89-90, Fiorentina's form in the league was slipping as the squad wasn't nearly good enough to cope with Baggio's genius. But despite all of this, he did what all greats do. He carried the team to the 89-90 UEFA Cup final, which La Viola lost to bitter rivals Juventus. Why is this year important? Because the UEFA Cup wasn't the only thing Fiorentina would lose to Juventus that year. A few weeks later, they would lose Baggio to them as well. Juventus had shelled out £8 million to bring Baggio to Turin, eclipsing Maradona and Gullit's transfers. Fiorentina fans were livid, heartbroken, and downright violent. What's today known as the Baggio riots started in Fiorentina and would last for days. 50 people were injured. People would go out carrying Molotov cocktails and baseball bats. The entire city went ballistic. Baggio was no longer their golden boy and could no longer help the team compete. His sale was completed only to save the club from bankruptcy, which wouldn't help soothe the tensions. 1990 was also a World Cup year, and no, it's not the World Cup you're thinking of. It was the first major tournament where this young star's talents started shining their brightest. We'll get to that one a bit later. Although this one was still theatrical for Italy, it was in the motherland. The coach didn't play Baggio for the first 2 games and therefore didn't score. But in the third game, he scored one of the most incredible goals ever. Playing off a 1-2 pass from his teammate, he went to dribble past 3 opposition players and bagged the first goal of the tournament, and probably the nicest one. He played well, starting 2 times again, but in the semi-final, with Baggio on the bench, Italy ended up losing to his home league rival Maradona. As a consolation, he scored the first goal in Italy's third-place game against England, thus securing them the bronze medal. His beginning at the Old Lady was just as dramatic, as the divine ponytail refused to put on a Juve scarf at his unveiling. Nevertheless, the first half of the season was impressive for him, as he scored 17 goals in the first 18 matches. However, the season took a significant downward turn as Juve went on a horrible losing streak. The low point came when they played away against Fiorentina, and he refused to take the penalty for the win because he had been teammates with the goalkeeper. The season ended in disappointment for Juve and Baggio as they only finished 7th and got knocked out of the Cup Winners' Cup in the semi-finals by Barcelona. In Baggio's second season at Juve, things started looking up as they brought Giovanni Trapattoni to the bench. The legendary Italian coach brought stability into the locker room and got 38 points and 18 wins to the squad, losing only 4 times. The game's style changed as Roberto started having more influence on the team as the game and key passes began to revolve around him more and more. His numbers reflect this, as he scored 18 goals for Juve that season, being edged out of the top scorer award by Marco van Basten. Juve finished only second in the league as the mighty Milan were too strong, not losing a single match all year. And it became obvious Baggio needed help. So, Juve signed Vialli for a world record fee at the time. But it wasn't enough. Juve ended up finishing 4th the next season, and even though all did not look well in the league, Europe was a different story. Juventus won the Cup Winners' Cup, and finally, after 15 years as a professional, Baggio was able to lift and kiss a trophy. In 1993, Baggio lifted his first piece of individual silverware, and on December 28, 1993, they awarded him the Ballon d'Or, the highest honor an individual can achieve. He was so dominant that year in the eyes of the panelists that he received more than 60% of the votes and beat his closest rival, Dennis Bergkamp, by 109 points. Even though Juve hadn't lost a single match all season in 1993-94, they lost one. Their one loss came from AC Milan, and those 3 points helped Milan edge the title away from Juve. Baggio was still impressive though, putting up 17 goals that season. But 1994 is remembered for another reason entirely in the career of Baggio. It was, again, time for a World Cup. And yes, this is the exact one you're thinking of. Baggio and Italy were horrible in the beginning, having scraped by on the skin of their teeth. Baggio didn't score or assist in the group stage, and Italy only won a single game. But that was a rough start, as the gods kissed Italy in the knockout stages. They started off losing against Nigeria, but the divine ponytail wouldn't let his country down like that, not yet anyway, as he scored an equalizer 2 minutes before the final whistle and completed his brace in extra time as Italy went on to the quarterfinals where they would face off against Spain. And Baggio scored both goals in that game, although Dino Baggio and not Roberto scored one. Roberto did, however, send Italy to the semifinals, virtually carrying them on his back the whole game and scoring in the 88th minute. In the semis, he did achieve 2 goals, both coming within 3 minutes of each other and one more beautiful than the other. The 2 goals were a testament to the kind of player Baggio was. The first is an elegantly curved ball, dribbling past one player and sending the ball to the back of the net with godlike grace and elegance. The second one was a run into the opposition box and a volley with his right, beating both his man and the keeper. Roberto was elegant and forceful, magnificent and brutal. He was anything and everything if it meant scoring a goal at the end. Unfortunately, this was the highlight of Baggio's tournament and probably of his career, as in the second half he would be injured and subbed off. But it was enough for Italy to be sent to the final to play against none other than Brazil. The final, and I'm being honest here, is the most boring final in World Cup history. It ended in a 0-0 draw, and even though Baggio was filled with painkillers and played through his injury, he wasn't the same Roberto anymore. And the game went to penalties. The score was 3-2 in favor of Brazil, and it was none other than Baggio who got up to take the penalty to keep Italy in the game. With the hopes of 50 million Italians on his shoulders and the eyes of the world on him, he missed. Brazil was the world champion, and Baggio was the player that cost Italy the final. He carried the whole nation on his shoulders and scored 6 out of the 7 goals for his country that tournament. Without him, they wouldn't have even made it out of the round of 16. But one kick, one miss, and the whole world forgot what Roberto Baggio did to get Italy to that moment. We know who he was. The World Cup in 1994 proved one thing. It proved he was the most significant Italian footballer to ever step on a pitch and put on that famous Azzurri shirt. That season was his last ever season at Juve. As it always does in football, it became time for a new challenger, a new face to lead the club forward, and a new king in Turin. That new king was Alessandro Del Piero. Due to the hamstring, Baggio wouldn't play until March, and by the time June rolled around, Coach Lippi decided it was time for him to go. That season would be Baggio's first season winning a league title with Juve, and then it was time to say goodbye. He ended up signing for their biggest rivals and Baggio's biggest tormentors, Milan. He would finish as the top assist maker in the league and made history by being the first player to win 2 Serie A titles in a row for different clubs. However, his time at AC was turbulent, as coaches deemed him surplus to requirements, even though Roberto still had many battles to win. Maybe they resented him for being too creative, too undisciplined, or perhaps they just hated him for missing that penalty. Whatever the case may be, Fabio Capello decided it was time for him to go. He would move to Bologna, making AC Milan regret their decision. He scored a career high of 22 goals in the league and helped Bologna finish 8th. The following season, he played for Inter because he wanted to play in the Champions League. More disagreements with coaches, mainly Marcello Lippi, led Baggio to leave Inter and move to Brescia. It looked like the move a player makes when they retire and want to rest. But not Roberto. Instead of Brescia struggling in a relegation battle, he would lead them to 8th in the league. Brescia is where Roberto finished his career, his last game coming against AC Milan. The tifosi at the stadium enthusiastically applauded him when he walked off the pitch for the last time, and even the great Paolo Maldini went up to hug him. Il Divino Condino finished his career winning 2 Serie A titles, 1 Coppa Italia, a UEFA Cup, and a Ballon d'Or. He scored 220 goals throughout his career and gave everything to the game. It's funny how these things work sometimes. Sometimes more than giving everything to the game is needed. All the greats we mentioned at the beginning of the video, Cristiano, Messi, Maradona, Henry, Zidane, all gave everything to the game too. The critical difference was the game appreciated them. Fate smiled, took care of them, and gave them coaches who nurtured them. From the very beginning, fate toyed with Baggio. He got injured and wasn't allowed on painkillers. After winning a Ballon d'Or, he was battered and constantly criticized by the press, the fans, his coaches, and his teammates. And yet, he only loved the game more. It only made him want to play more, score more, and win more. We can all learn something valuable from the career and life of the Divine Ponytail. No matter how stacked the odds are against us, no matter how much flack and hate we get, the only acceptable course of action to take is to put our heads down and keep going, keep doing what we love. But when all is said and done, we can't help but wonder, what if Baggio had coaches who understood him? What if his injuries had been more manageable? What if he hit that penalty a bit more softly? What then? Would he be mentioned in the same breath as Messi, Ronaldo, Pele, and Maradona? We'll never know. We've come to the end of the video. If you want to see more football stories, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to Champagne Football, as we are committed to giving you fascinating stories about the sport we all love and cherish. Please let us know in the comments below if you have any video suggestions. And above all, thank you for watching.